So we're learning the fourth attribute of Chesed in Perek Chamishi. Okay, so the next two, which we'll hopefully cover today, is, or we'll see how far we get in the second two, is tzedakah, charity, which is the obvious Chesed, and having guests. But it's a little complicated how we apply this in both Avodas Hashem, in our service of God, and Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. But let's see. He gets a little Kabbalistic in these two. So the Ramak. So the Ramak says like this: Revi is the fourth level of Chesed, is Lasis Tzedakah Lanim, to give charity, to give tzedakah to an ani, a person who's lacking, someone who's poor in something. And tzedakah could be in many ways. It could be tzedakah ruchi, spiritual, emotional, material. Simply said, to help someone with money if they need. Vidugmasam, and here he says, what is the dugma? How do we see this in Hashem? Is we have to find the attributes of Hashem that are considered aniyim, poor. So just like tzedakah is to give to the poor, so we know that gemilas chasadim, to give, let's say, a loan, which is known as a gemilas chasad, is both for rich people. Also, a rich person also needs to take a loan sometimes to grow their enterprise, and that's why it's known that gemilas chasadim is bein lani and bein lachir. Hey Ariel, but when it comes to tzedakah, tzedakah is the focus. Tzedakah, by definition, is to give to someone who's lacking something, to give them it, not because they need to expand. And what is within Hashem, the levels of Hashem? What is considered tzedakah? What is considered aniyim? What is aniyim? What is poor that you're going to give to Hashem tzedakah, so to say, is the attributes of Yisod Malchus. Interesting enough, it's very much connected to this week's parshas. Yisod is the level of Yosef Tzaddik, which is the Yisod of the six midos of Hashem. So we have kindness, severity, Tiferes' beauty, and we spoke about last week about Netzach and Hod, perseverance and acknowledgement. So that's first five, and they come into Yisod is to connect. Yisod is the part of the midah of a person of connection, of kesher, to connect. That's why it's the place where men and women connect. So it's about connecting. And Malchus is the receptacle of the six midos that's given from Yisod into Malchus, which is Yisod is the completion of the male, and Malchus is the female. And so Yisod and Malchus meet, that's the union of Yisod and Malchus together that makes up the seven midos. But a person here, the Ramak says that the Oni can be in Yisod and Malchus. Means Malchus, if doesn't have, Malchus is always a makabel, always has to receive. So that could be lacking. And Yisod could be the ability to bring all the midos together and to have a kesher and to have a connection, that could be lacking. And therefore the midos of Yisod and Malchus are considered aniyim. He doesn't say if he's talking about specifically, if it's talking about aniyim in the time of galus, of exile. So he says, what is a tzedakah? What is a tzedakah that you could give to the attributes of Yisod and Malchus? So he says, "V'hatzedakah haruya lehem," the appropriate tzedakah to give, the charity to give to the attributes. What was the question? Sorry, I didn't see that. Aniyim, sorry, means a poor people. Ani means a poor person. So the poverty is in the attributes of chesed, of Yisod and Malchus. Means, again, Yisod of chesed is a kindness on its own. That's the attribute of kindness. Netzach, which is an extension, perseverance is to be focused to do the chesed. Acknowledgement is an extension of gevura, of severity, of limitations. Means because at the end of the day, haida, acknowledgement is it's you're acknowledging this the way it is. It doesn't have that like even Tov was asking last week that perseverance, Netzach should come after acknowledgement, but the idea of Netzach is connected to you're full of energy to do. Yisod is taking everything you have, who you are, and connecting it. Yosef Tzaddik is the mashber. He gives from all the attributes. He gives down to Malchus, to Yehuda, to the world of separation. But if there's a weakness in the link, in the ability to connect, So you could have a lot of good things about you. You could have a lot of inside of you. You're a kind person. You're a person with boundaries. You could have the balance of Tiferes. You could even have the acknowledgement. You could have the perseverance. You could have all those things. But when it comes to actually at the point of connection, you could be poor at that ability. A lot of people have a lot. Today you see it sometimes. We're in social media where people are that you could have them at your table and they won't say a word. They'll be almost antisocial. And then on their social media page, they're full of ideas and they have a lot to say and a lot of quality things to say, but they can't get into they can't connect when it comes in a public setting. So the yisod is to actually bring it in, to connect, to bring it in, to make it happen, to connect it to the world. That's Yosef. He's the mashpir. He gives. So you have to give something, and to give sometimes at that point there's a poverty, there's something lacking, there's anias, there's a person's poor at that, and in the attribute of Hashem, that's also that needs strength. Yisod needs strength. Yisod in general, we know that in the attribute of Yisod that there's a lot from in Breslev from Reb Nachman about the attribute of Yisod. The attribute of Yisod is a person where a person also could become weak when you connect to the wrong things. It's easy to connect to the wrong things. So when we connect to the wrong things, even though we have intentions, we want to connect to the right things, but it doesn't work out. The midah of Yisod is vulnerable, because and that's why a person sometimes doesn't have in the sexual realm that where a person does inappropriate things is because that's the vulnerability of Yisod. And Malchus also is totally is dependent. I mean, later Malchus becomes the crown, but Malchus is all receiving, like speech is just a means of communication. But Yisod is part of the actual attributes, but it's the part that has to connect to get it to the speech, to get it to the outside world. So how do you give charity to the attribute of Yisod? He says, "V'hatzedakah haruya leihem," not just Yisod and Malchus, is, he says, Pirush B'Tekunim, he says we break it up in the 4 letters of Tzedakah. Tzedakah is made up of Tzadik Dalet Kufhei, and the Tzadik Dalet Kufhei are actually almost like a remedy. It's like a segula for strengthening the attribute of Yisod. What does the tzaddik represent? Tzaddik is a person should try to say, tzaddik is the number value of 90. A person should try to say 90 amens a day. 90 times amen. Amen, amen. I mean, you don't just say the word amen. Amen is after a blessing. It can't be, we know this, it can't be an orphaned amen. It's called the amen yisayim, a yasayim. You can't have an amen. It says even a person who's listening to Kaddish or comes by a shul, everyone says amen. You can't just say amen 3 minutes later. Amen has to be said. About the first thing they teach a bar mitzvah boy when he reads the Torah is that it takes time for the Balkorah to kind of find a place and get ready to read again after the person makes the blessing. So the bar mitzvah boy kind of initially learns that amen is the first thing you say before you start reading. Sometimes it could take a few seconds or maybe a minute until the Balkorah is ready to start reading, even after the blessing. You don't say amen before you read. You have to say amen after the person says a blessing. There can't be a separation between amen and the blessing. So we don't just say the word amen. So you have to find an appropriate way to say amen 90 times a day. It means after blessings to say the word amen. So whether it's going to shul, going to, there are people who are very careful in the morning to say Birchas HaShachar, and they say the morning blessings. We say a whole bunch of blessings, Baruch Atah Hashem, Nosan L'Sefchi, to say it with someone so someone can answer amen on their blessings. So to create 90 amens a day is the tzaddik, is the number 90 that strengthens Yisod and Malchus. These are like segulas almost. They're like weapons, so to say, or armory that helps a person stay focused, whether it's in the Yisod, the connection, and the Malchus in the speech, in the giving over. Dalit Kedushas, 4 times you should say Kedusha. Like we say Es Shem, we say Kaddish, Kaddish, Kaddish. So we say it 4 times with the repeat of the Amidah. And in the Uvalot Tzion, if you put it all together, we have 4 times a day a person should say Kedusha, which is the Kaddish, Kaddish. Then we have, so that's the Dalid of tzedakah. That's the number 4. The next letter in the word tzedakah is kuf, which is the number value of 100. We know that King David instituted that a person should have 100 blessings a day. So most people, if you pray 3 times a day, the Amida, you already have 3 times 19, so you already have a good part of the blessings counted for, and then you eat food, and then you make throughout the day there's blessings. So there's a calculation. That's why Shabbos people are more careful to answer. If you say Amen, it also could count as a blessing. The person should try to make as many blessings as they can a day to reach the number of 100. So you should have 100 blessings a day. This day, David Melech instituted when there was a plague to make sure to be careful that every person should say 100 blessings a day. And the hay of tzedakah, so we have the tzaddik is to say 90 amens, 4 times kedusha, 100 blessings a day. And the final hay of the letter tzedakah should be for the person should learn chumash every day. You know, chumash is the Torah Shebiksav, is the written law. Persons should learn every day from the chumash. You know, Chabad, it's very careful. We have the custom to learn chitas. We say chumash tilam tani. We say chumash every day. So in general, the Ramak says a person should learn chumash every day. So those 4 things of 90 amins, 4 kedushas, 100 blessings, and learning chumash every day, which is the 5 books of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is representing the hay of tzedakah, that will strengthen the attributes of Yisod and Malchus, of connection and communication. And aside for that, those are the basics. That's the basic plan of strengthening Yisod and Malchus. And what is on top of that, he says? Each person according to their abilities. Yamshech tzedakah should add mitiferes la'aniyim halalu. Tiferes, we know, is Torah. Yaakov is Torah. Yaakov emes, Moshe emes, Torah emes. That we know that the attribute of Tiferes, because Tiferes is balance. What makes something beautiful? You know, it's very easy for a person to buy a black dress or a black suit or a single colored garment and say, okay, I look good in this because it's easier. It's harder to mix colors. So the Tiferes is a balance, mixed colors, right? Yosef had a colorful jacket. The idea is that to find beauty in colors, that's much more challenging. So Tiferes is the balance. Torah has to be balanced. And Torah has a balance of when we have to be kind and when we're severe. When we have limitations, when we have shiurim, when we have measurements, and all the balance of Torah. So therefore, Torah and the giving of Torah, the bringing down of Torah together creates the Tiferes, the beauty of Torah. So when it says you should bring Tiferes means Torah. So through Torah, learning Torah is going to help a person both in their connection and their communication, which is Yisod Malchus. Now, there's another in the laws of matnas aniyim, gifts to the poor. We know that the Torah has, aside for just charity, tzedakah, we also have what's known as the parts that a person, the main sustenance of a person is food. So we have the laws of the field, right? If a person has a field and wants to harvest their field, you have to leave a payah, you have to leave a corner of the field for the poor. You have to leave certain fruits that are left on the vine or left on the vineyard, on the olive tree, or left. There's parts that we have to leave for the poor. We have also the shikha. If you forget something and you're not allowed to go back and get it, these are the laws of matnas aniyim, that the Torah gifts from your property, from your field, to the poor, certain things that the Torah says leket, things that you've gathered that fall down while you're gathering. You have to leave it for the poor. If you forgot something, you have to leave it for the poor. You have to leave a corner of your field for the poor. And these are all parts of that the poor person should be able to benefit and have what to eat. And there was laws, and you had to do it. And there was times of the day they could come, and there was also when how long do you have to wait? If it's a week or if it's a few days, no one's showed up. When could you continue just finishing up the harvest? So these are the laws of Zerayim. This is the first part of the Mishnayos. But that's called also matnas aniyim. That's also gifts to the poor. So what does this mean in strengthening the yesod, the power of communication, the power of connection, yesod malchus? So tzedakah charity is the basic plan is 90 amens, 100 blessings, 4 kedushas, and learning Torah. So what is the leket and the peya and the shikha? These are the three of the field. Leket is the ones that while you're gathering. The shikha is things that you forget. Peya is the corner. So how does that mean? How does that work in our connection to Hashem, and especially to the midas? He says, "V'yazmin aleihem leket mesfiras kula." Take little what's leket? Leket is little pieces that are left when that fall out while you're gathering the grains. You have to leave it for the poor, right? What does it say about? Everyone knows the story of Ruth and Naomi, that they come back to Boaz, and they come back to Canaan, to Eretz Yisrael, and they go to Boaz, and they go to, that's how they meet, that's how she met Boaz, that's how Ruth became the grandmother of David HaMelech, is when she meets Boaz while she's collecting as a poor woman, because she came back from Moab very poor. She comes back poor, she goes to the field to collect from the harvest, things that were falling down. So she was collecting, and she met Boaz. And she ends up marrying Boaz and having, being the father of Yishai, the grandmother of Yishai and David. So what's leket? What does it mean? The leftovers, the fallouts of the spheros. That every one of the spheros, the attributes should contribute, right? Everyone has something. You can't just the midos have what's called inclusion. The midos can't be too. Esav is the attributes that are extreme. Extreme people, Torah doesn't like a person that is too extreme. If you can't have escaladus, if you can't have balance in your life, if every situation you're giving, or every situation you're reserved, right? You can say a lot of times you have a reason to be, there's boundaries and there's limitations, and there's also many reasons to be giving. But if you're always one way, that's not the way of Torah. Like I said before, Torah is balance. So the attribute of balance is tiferes. But even within the attributes themselves, there has to be inclusion, right? So we have a certain. It's brought down. We have opinions in Torah that are always towards a certain way. For instance, the house of Hillel in the Mishnah is usually going towards to be lenient. If there's a question what the law should be, the house of Hillel usually goes towards to be lenient. And the house of Shammai is usually more strict. So if there's a question, if there's a doubt what the law is, how do we work in certain situations, the house of Hillel usually goes towards to be lenient, and the house of Shammai is usually more strict. And traditionally, that's the way they were. The house of Hillel we know was the great kind person. The idea of tzedakah, obviously, Yisrael, we learned from Hillel. Shammai, the Gemara tells us, was more reserved, right? The 3 Gentiles who came to Shammai and they wanted to convert to Judaism on extreme conditions, Shammai sent him away. Hillel accommodated them and figured out, and they all became converts because he was more of the side of Chesed. But it's brought down that sometimes the house of Hillel has to be severe and be more strict, and the house of Shammai is also more lenient. Why? Because if you're just extreme the whole time one way, then that's not a way of service of Hashem. I mean, you're just a personality of giving, or a personality who's always limited, who's always reserved, who's always trying. Of course, you can find a million reasons to create boundaries, but if you're always creating boundaries, then that's you're just expressing your attributes. You're not being a balanced person. So same thing over here. We have leket. You have to give to the yesod, to connect. Yosef HaTzadik has to gather in from all the attributes. So you have to bring down chesed. That means the ability to kind of enforce the ability of connection, the ability of communication. It has to be driving from other midos. So leket is misfir skulam. The shikha, he says, what is shikha? Shikha is forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is one of the attributes of one of the gifts of the poor, that if you forget something, you can't go back and get it. Leave it for the poor. So here he says also, v'shikha misoid ha'oimer, it's from the stalks, the stalks of wheat. Ha'elyan shibina. Upeya mibechinas malchus atzma shepeya the Shar Hamidah. So here, again, this is more Kabbalistic. I said before, these attributes are a little more complicated. So that the idea, he says, the forgetfulness comes from, where do we have forgetfulness? We have forgetfulness from and it's a mind thing, right? That our mind forgets things. It's also lack of focus is forgetfulness. It's brought down. We say in when we read the tefillah for the Rabbeinu Tam tefillah, we say zikaron beinenecha, that it should be, a person has to remember the Torah, remember Hashem. So there's kind of, it doesn't explain what it really means, but he says that there's, from the attribute of bina, of understanding, there's understanding that can, evidently there's an understanding that could be just about understanding a situation, or there's a forgetfulness of understanding. It's shikha of bina. What's bina's understanding? What's shikha? What does it mean to forget? What is the forgetfulness of understanding? Is that to allow for your understanding not to just be for you to analyze a situation, but to use your understanding in the attributes themselves. It means the bina really is also a place where that feeds to the midas. When you understand something, you respond to it, right? If you don't understand the danger around you, you're not going to be scared. If a person understands we're in a dangerous situation, the person who understands the danger of the situation has fear, or can have fear, because you understand. A person who's oblivious of danger has no fear. Why? Because you have no emotional response. You don't know there's anything to be scared for, to be fearful of. So sometimes what happens is too much understanding could be, there's a negative to that, right? Because you're in your own head. So what is the shikha? What is the forgetfulness of understanding? Is to kind of don't be so much in your own head, and let the emotions go a little bit freer than to kind of dictate constantly, right? Sometimes what's going to happen is one of the reasons you're going to be limited or hesitant to connect to someone is usually in your head. Right? Where is it? What holds a person back? Again, Yesod is connection. What holds a person back from connecting to another person is a lot of times, sometimes it's in our head. It's, we're kind of analyzing the situation, nervous how I'm going to be received, nervous how, if I'm forthcoming, if that's going to be, if that, how that person's going to take it. So because connection is our initial interaction, it's the beginning of our interaction with people, with someone else. So that's where there's a lot of reserve. That's why, again, Yesod is an ani, is poor, because you have to push yourself to actually connect. And so, where's there a vulnerability? It's in your mind. Your mind is holding you back. So what's the forgetfulness? Forget about it. Put away a little bina. Don't hold yourself back from connecting. So, I mean, don't get crazy. You don't have to be irresponsible. But sometimes, don't, there's a hundred reasons why you shouldn't connect to someone, right? We all have 100 reasons why we shouldn't go out tonight and be social. So, but just forget a little bit of that bina. Don't, kind of close down a bit and just let yourself be. So I think that's what he means, that there's forgetfulness, that to give forgetfulness to Yesod is to dial down a bit the bina, dial down the analyzing every situation. And then he says, the next thing is, he says, and so v'shikcha is misoida oimer elyon shehi bina. So forgetfulness is forgetfulness within bina, within understanding. And peya, we said, is the corner you leave for the poor person. So what is the difference between the other matnas aniyim, the other gifts to poor people, is all around kind of, if you drop something, don't pick it up. Right? If you drop a little chesed, he said leket is to drop from the midos into our ability to connect. Right? So if you drop something, you don't have to pick up every single piece of wheat that's out there. If you drop up to a certain amount of wheat, if it's a big pile, then you're allowed to pick it up. But if you drop one or two pieces, just leave it. Let the poor person come and get it. The other one is, if you forget something, leave it. Let the poor person come and get it. Peya is actually a designated spot. It's not about forgetting or dropping. Peya is you actually say this corner of my field, I'm designating, I'm designating for the poor. So it's not a something that comes by the by and by, right? If a person is very careful, I mean, I'm sure the Torah frowns on that. If a person says, okay, the Torah says if I drop a few pieces of wheat, I have to leave it. So I'm gonna figure out a way to gather my wheat that I should never drop something. Right? The Torah is going to frown on such a person, even though halachically he didn't do or she didn't do anything wrong, because she didn't drop anything. If you don't drop anything, if you try to never to forget something, so you're never going to leave something because you never forgot it. Right? There's ways the person could try to manipulate it. God knows, God sees everything, but because everyone drops something and everyone forgets something, but to try to be focused the whole time, But so in the attributes, it's to bring it, drop a little chesed for your sod to communicate. Dial down your understanding a bit. But peya is actually, you have to be proactive. You have to leave a corner, even of your tree. You have to leave a part and say, this I'm leaving for the poor. So what is the peya in the midos, in our interaction between the charity that we say these are matnas aniyim, the gifts of the poor? What does it mean when it comes to peya, to leave a corner of something? So he says, upeya mibchinas hamalchus atzma shipeya l'shar midos. So he says like this: what is the last attribute? Malchus. Malchus is communication. Now, the reason, what's Malchus? What's the word Malchus mean? Malchus means kingship. What is a king? A job of a king, of a ruler, not of an Adon is a ruler, but a king is not a person who imposes their rule. A king is crowned, right? King David was crowned. Saul was crowned, right? A person who's a dictator, that's not a king, that's a dictator. So the idea of a king is that the people say we want a leader, right? The Jewish people came to Samuel the prophet, and says we want a king. We want someone to be a king over us. So what does it mean to be a king? So that, and like it's brought down in Chassidus, the king's job, you're not hiring the king because you say, well, we need the king's money. We need the king's treasure. All that the king has is from the people. The people pay taxes, and the taxes make the king wealthy. Whereas the king lives off the taxes of the people. So the people are actually providing for the king so the king could rule over them. So that is the attribute of Malchus. What's the attribute of Malchus? It's kingship. The attribute of kingship, it receives from all the other attributes. It has nothing of its own. A king you don't have to, one of the conditions is you don't have to be wealthy. If the king is wealthy, that's private. The job of the king as being a king is that he takes as a leader, he takes, and sometimes he needs to take land, he takes land, but he takes from the people to rule over the people. So to Malchus itself has nothing. It's like words. Malchus is communication. Letters and words, you could say anything, but you have to feed ideas into the words. If you want to communicate something logical, whether it is an emotion or an idea, so the ideas have to go into words, but the way to communicate the words is through our speech. So it receives from the other attributes, but it's the only way to communicate outwards, and it gives over the rule. It rules so that's why Malchus is full circle. Malchus receives, but also gives. It becomes the king. And in the king himself, all the qualities of the king are private. But it expresses itself in the fact that he's king. It makes him a better king if he's a smart king, if he's a kind king, if he knows how to build limitations. But those are all tools that he should be a better king to communicate to others. So what does it mean? He says peya. What does it mean to leave a corner? Is to leave a corner. Malchus leaves for the other attributes. Because Malchus, at the end of the day, kingship, takes from all the attributes, but uses what it takes, like a king takes the taxes of the people and then rules over the people. The flip side, it says when Mashiach comes, Malchus is going to be higher. The king is going to be the level of Malchus is going to be higher than the other 9 attributes. A woman is going to be higher than a man. A woman is represented in the attribute of Malchus. So the queen, the king and the queen is both of them. Actually, Malchus is the female because it receives, like the king has to receive from the people, but then rules over the people. So the Malchus, he says over here, if I understand it correctly, leaves a corner. It says me Malchus atzma she peya l'shar midos. because the power to communicate comes from to rule and to communicate comes from Malchus. So once it comes into the king, now it's elevated, right? It's like the tax money. You pay taxes, and then the government gives you back a tax deductible. The government gives you, sometimes the government has to give contributions to the community, right? Sometimes we went through hard times in our history, past few years, where the government gave money back to the community, even though where's the money comes from the government. But the same thing is that's the pay. The pay is after it goes through the cycle of all the midas coming down. Once it's able to be communicated in speech, then Malchus gives back to the other 9 attributes. It's a Kabbalistic idea. I'm going to leave it at that. But he says something else. He adds to this. It says, when it comes to the gifts of the field, the manas aniyim, the gifts to the poor, it says in the verse of Torah, it says, you have to leave these, whether you drop something on the floor, you forget something, or the corner of the field, you have to leave it for the poor person and for the ger, and for the person who's it's the literal translation of a ger is a convert. But ger is not only a convert, ger is a foreigner, right? Ger yia zarecha. It says about, we're going into the story of Mitzrayim now, Egypt, right? In the Parsha, Yaakov comes to Mitzrayim. God tells Avram, your children will be gerim, will be foreigners in a foreign land. So a person who's not a citizen, a local, is called a ger, a foreigner. So it says that if for a foreigner, someone who's foreign, you also have to leave them fields so they can have what to eat, because they don't live there, they don't own land. So they need also to have to provide. So they come to the fields and they pick up as well. So the pasuk says you have to leave it for the poor person and for the foreigner, the ger. Tazevosam shavtfilu atiferes ger lamata b'malchus. He says over here that what's Tiferes? Tiferes is Torah. We said before Tiferes is Torah. So Torah is God's wisdom. Torah is God's wisdom, that God put his chachma, his wisdom into Torah. But Torah has to be learned. Torah doesn't have to stay on the shelf. These Torah is not ideas that are meant for a library. Torah, you have to take the Torah and read it and integrate the laws of Torah and the ideas of Torah into our lives. So what does it mean to leave for the ger is to feed Torah. What does it mean to feed Torah? To live your life according to Torah. Torah is not an abstract idea. The person says, I want to see what the book says. Torah is something that you learn to live your life. When you live your life according to Torah, that's what it means to leave for the ger, for the foreigner, because Torah, so to say, is dependent on how we live our life. If we live our life according to Torah, so then we're leaving for Torah a corner of the field. It says shafilu tiferes ger lamata b'malchus. And what's malchus? We said speech. Speech is to learn Torah. You have to speak the words of Torah. He says another interesting idea. He says we know that one of the ideas of charity is to give a tenth, to give a tithing. Everything is dependent on how we actually behave. So what is the tenth? The 10th midah is malchus. How we speak, how we communicate, malchus is the power of the attributes that goes to the next world. Where do we have an ability to refine and elevate the world is the attribute of malchus. We take Torah mitzvahs and we act on it. Our actions are all the attributes of malchus, of kingship. So he says that our job is that to take from malchus elevates. The purpose of creation is how we behave. The purpose of creation is that we should take Torah mitzvahs and integrate Torah mitzvahs into our lives, the commandments of Torah mitzvahs in our lives. So that's what he says, that you have to leave 1/10. The 10th attribute, which is malchus, has to be elevated into all the other 9 attributes. And malchus goes back to the communication. So here, this is what we learned in this week's parsha, last week's parsha mainly, the interaction between Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef is Yisod, is the power to communicate. He is the provider, but providing who and providing what? If you provide, but no one acts on what what they've been given, if you don't use what we've been provided to actually make a change, Yehuda is the one who's out there in the world. Yehuda represents the person that's out there in the world. So Yehuda is Malchus. And he says that when Malchus, when we actualize what Torah mitzvahs is about, so we're bringing back to Yesod. Yesod is dependent on how we're going to behave. Yesod feeds, communicates. That's why who gives birth? The woman gives birth. The man can only give the seed, but the woman gives birth. The actual child comes 9 months in the mother's womb. So that's the and then there's a child. Then there's something. There's fruits to your labor. So Yesod is dependent on how it'll give everything it has, that Malchus should make something of this world, but make something of this world. Until you actually make something of this world, Yesod is still a poor person. So he says, El HaYesod HaNikra Ani v'im yikashenu b'tiferes. And if you're going to connect it with Torah, which is Tiferes, Yite min ha'maiser el ager, then you're going to be giving from the 10th attribute back to the foreigner, because Torah is foreign until Torah comes. Torah is spiritual. Torah is like a foreigner in this world. What does godliness have to do with this mundane, dark world? Only if you live your life according to Torah, then it becomes a toshev, a person that's settled here. But godliness, the ideas of godliness on its own, just to be an idea, that's a ger, that's a foreigner to this world. So our holiness, godliness is foreign to this world. Our job is to make that it should no longer be foreign. And how do we do that? By actualizing in this world and making it a place for God. The comment to Kunim Nichlolim is, and he says there's many ideas included in this. We're going to stop here. We're not going to go to the next attribute because that's even longer. He goes into the attribute of having guests. And who does he say the guests are? The guests are that, what is the idea of having guests? What's the difference between giving charity and having guests? There's a fundamental difference between giving charity and having guests. Giving the fundamental difference between giving someone something and hosting them is you're there and they're here, right? Someone says, could you have some people that have no money for Shabbos eat by you? No, they can't eat by me, but I'll buy them food, right? That's charity, you're buying them food, but you're not ready to host them in your house. You're not ready to bring them home to you, to your house. You're ready to provide for them as long as they're there and you're here. So that's kindness, right? You're giving charity to someone, but are you, I mean, obviously, we don't just bring anyone home. You have to make sure that it's not going to way of destruction. It's not going to become harmful. But it's not about, when it's not about that, when it's just about that I have my space and I'm ready to, tell me, I'll write a check, I'll give a credit card number, whatever you need. But you want me to host them in my house? Achnasas Archim is the next level. What's Achnasas Archim? You're bringing them into your house. It's not that you're giving them for them to live in their place, but you're bringing them into your place. And that's the next level of chesed. Today we studied about giving, leaving, giving, right? The farmer who leaves goes home. The poor person comes to his field or her field and collects what you've left for them. And they go back to their place. But Achnasas Archim is to bring people into your space. Are you allowing someone into your space? It doesn't just have to mean for a meal. It doesn't just have to mean for a night, to rest in your house over Shabbos. But are you letting people into your space? That's Achnasas Archim. That's the next level of kindness. And that we'll learn about next week. What is the idea of Achnasas Archim? Tov, anyone want to add anything? If not, we will see you, Be'ezus Hashem, next week. Take care.